Tapovanam, Chapter 14. By Swami's grace, we've reached the chapter 14 of Tapovanam and we shall be continuing with the same. Whoever you are mine. I will not give you up. Wherever you are near me. You cannot go beyond my reach. I pull the wires of this puppet show. Wherever you may be, remember, strings attached to your leg is in my hand, said Sri Shirdi Sai Baba. Sri Satya Sai Baba is demonstrating that he is using the strings to draw people to his feet, like drawing little sparrows. The Eternal Savior, John Hislop, and the image of Jesus. This is the story of Dr. John Hislop of Mexico. Ever since his 16th birthday, he was attracted to spiritual pursuits. He was an earnest spiritual sadhak who was deeply influenced in the search for truth. He came into contact with eminent personalities and spiritual thinkers like Annie Besant, Jiddu Krishnamurti, Paramhansa Yogananda, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Swami Shivananda, and experts in the Buddhist system of Vipassana, and for years progressed in the path of spiritual inquiry, following their guidance. But at the end of it all, he realized that the sweet fountain of love in his western heart had gone dry and it held now nothing but dreadful emptiness. In 1968, he heard for the first time about Sri Satya Sai Baba, came down to Puttaparthi and had his darshan. At the very sight of Baba, he sensed that he was the root of all spiritual wisdom and awareness. He clearly felt that God Himself had entered his heart as love and that abiding love was truly Baba. As a result of his elevating experience, he could develop the rich insight of viewing the whole universe as suffused with love. On the eve of Shivaratri in 1973, Baba took Hislop and some other in the Bandipur forest in the district of Mysore. By about noon, they reached the guest house in the forest. At dusk, with the help of some forest dwellers who acted as guides, they walked a long distance until they reached the sands of a mountain stream. They sat in the sand bed of the river's for rest. Swami picked up two small branches of bush, placed one farther in his palm, and asked Hislop what it was. Hislop said it was the cross. Swami closed his palm over it, gently blew 3 times on it. When he opened his palm, the cross bore the image of Jesus. He gave it to Hislop and said, "This is exactly how Jesus looked like at the moment he gave up his life. It does not look all as imagined by painters or as described by writers. He had no food for 8 days. His stomach was empty and drawn inwards. His body became dry. His ribs became prominently noticeable." Hislop started at the cross in speechless wonder. Baba went on. "The cross is actually made out of the same wood of the original cross which Jesus was crucified. It took me some time to search for and find that 2,000-year-old wood. Every bit of the original cross has disintegrated and merged with the constituent elements. I had therefore to gather these elements, and when I had collected enough to make this cross, I materialized it. The image of Jesus, as you see in the cross, is the same as one at the time of death." After a few weeks, Hislop and his wife went back to Mexico. As the image of the cross was very tiny, the facial features of Jesus were not clearly visible. Walter Wolf, one of Hislop's friends, took several color photographs of the image of Jesus part by part, enlarged them, and made a larger picture out of them. The finished picture was extraordinarily touching, arousing boundless kindness and compassion. Photographs were all arranged on a table so as to reveal the intricate and minute carving on the image. Viewers wondered at the creative power of Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Until that day, the sky was absolute clear at the Mexican coast. All of a sudden, without any warning, a terrible lightning flashed amidst dark clouds. Strong winds gathered speed in a few moments and threatened to smash the window panes. Door curtains were flying. In the midst of this chaos that developed all of a sudden, Mr. Hislop recalled, "It is now 5 p.m. Today is Friday, the same day, the time of Christ's death by crucifixion. What is happening now before our eyes has been described in the Bible too." She produced a copy of the Holy Book and read the relevant section. At the moment Jesus died on the cross, there was storm with thunder and lightning filled the sky. The decorated hangings of pictures and photographs on the wall flew away. Everyone present there in the home of Hislop felt delighted at witnessing the phenomenon, too wonderful for their imagination. Next day, the San Diego Tribune reported the heavy storm that had suddenly occurred quite unexpectedly. Hislop and his friends felt there are some sort of relation between the sudden recurrence of the out-of-season storm that reportedly occurred 2000 years ago and the cross materialized by Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. When Dr. Fani Banda reported this incident to Swami, he confirmed that the incidents had actually occurred and they were truly related as guessed by Hislop and his friends. Indira Devi. Born a Russian, Indira Devi had mastered yoga from India. She discarded her original name, Dr. Mrs. Kinnear, and assumed the Indian name of Indira Devi. She used to teach yoga in her ashram in Tecate in Mexico. When she was just 60 years old, she happened to meet Howard Murphy in Madras and heard for him for the first time about Sri Satya Sai Baba. She was not particularly impressed. Once while in Mumbai, she happened to see the treatise Bhrigu Samhita, which was in the possession of Chaya Sastri Kantilal Pandya. She looked for and found what was written about herself in that book. She read, "Because of the punyam accumulated in your earlier lives, you are able to have darshan of some exalted personage. Even at this moment, you are under his protection." The account further clarified, exalted personage means God. In 1996, while she was in her 66th birthday, she had the darshan of Sri Satya Sai for the first time. At the very first sight, she developed strong faith and belief in Baba. Swami gave her an interview and asked what she would desire to have. She did not ask for worldly wealth or even salvation. She simply prayed, "Swami, please light up the spiritual lamp in my heart." Swami materialized and gave her a locket and vibhuti and assured her, "Whenever you need anything, ask me. Irrespective of physical distance between us, I will hear your prayers. I will hear you." There occurred once a wildfire in the Mexican mountains that destroyed thousands of houses and many acres of forest. It was feared that the conflagration might consume the Sai Institute in Mexico and US. Unable to withstand its fury, many people abandoned their house and possession and fled for their life. Traveling by car, they reached the top of a mountain and took refuge in a house. They spent 4 hours there praying to Sai. The fire raged below them all round the mountain. After it died down at last, they returned fearing the worst. To their relief and surprise, they found that Sai Nilayam of Indira Devi was unscathed, even though everything around it got completely gutted. The unscathed Nilayam, untouched by fire, stood in the prayer hall, remained as beautiful as ever. They felt that Baba had personally stood guard at the place and safeguarded the Nilayam. At the precise time of this daunting fire, Indira Devi was in Chicago giving a discourse about Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. She saw the ravage and severity of the fire on television. She also read in the newspaper that the fire had occurred quite close to her Sai Nilayam, but she was not at all worried. She thought, "It belongs to Bhagwan. He will do with it whatever he wishes. So be it." True to her steadfast faith, the institution remained safe. A few days later, she received an invitation from Baba to come over and inaugurate the Women's College in Anantapur. She came all the way from Mexico and participated in the celebrations. Before she left for Mexico, Bhagwan materialized for her a locket bearing the image of goddess Lakshmi. While giving it to her, he said, "This is for your hope. This will protect you. Hereafter, it will never be threatened by hazards of fire." When Indra Devi came to Puttaparthi, she organized yoga classes for the benefit of school children. Baba was pleased with her services. He materialized a diamond studded ring for her. She had long ago given up wearing any jewelry, but she would wear the ring, she thought, provided it bore Swami's image. Swami sensed her thought. He took the ring back, blew gently on it. Immediately, it changed its form. Now, it bore a small stone with Swami's image on it. Swami put on her finger himself and said, "Whenever you wish, you can see me in this ring. Only you and nobody else can thus see me. When you look into the ring, you will find me exactly as I happen to be in India at the moment, and you can see what I am doing." Indra Devi was once in California. She looked in the ring and saw Baba sitting in a white car. She recorded her note in her diary: "Swami is traveling somewhere." On another occasion, she found Baba talking to devotees in front of him in a semicircle. The scene she felt was not of Prashanti Nilayam. She noted the detail too in her diary. Sometime later, when she came back to Prashanti Nilayam, she checked up with Swami Kasturi about her two visions. He confirmed the first one showed Swami while on tour. Indra Devi questioned, "But Swami's car is not white?" Sri Kasturi clarified that at the time of her vision, Swami had been indeed travelled by a white car. Second was explained by Sri Kasturi as it happened in far off Kerala. On 21st November 1970, in the course of the All India Conference of the Office Bearers of Sri Satya Sai Seva Samiti held in Prashanti Nilayam, Indra Devi spoke in presence of Bhagavan. In her speech, she referred to the above two incidents. Sri Kasturi quipped, "So, you have been spying on Baba." Sai Baba, as well as the entire audience, burst into laughter. Indra Devi rendered invaluable service to spread Baba's message in the US through films, books, and lectures. During her campaign, she faced an unexpected problem. Those who attended her gatherings began to request for Vibhuti materialized by Swami. On her next visit to India, she mentioned this to Swami. She suddenly found a beautiful container with the lid materialized in Baba's hand as if somebody handed it to him from above. Swami showed it to her and said, "This is a container of inexhaustible vibhuti. You may distribute any amount of vibhuti, it will never run out." He emptied the entire quantity in it on a piece of paper and gently tapped it. It got filled up again with fresh vibhuti. As he handed over the silver container to Indra Devi, he directed her to use the vibhuti from it for healing the sick. Thereafter, whenever sick people came to her, she used to tell about Swami's glory and give them some quantity of the holy ashes. The simple treatment restored many to sound health. When Sri Indra Devi came to Puttaparthi for the Shivaratri festivities in 1969, Swami invited her, Walter Cowan, his wife Elsie Cowan, and some others in the interview room. After some discussion on spiritual matters, Swami materialized a beautiful rosary containing 108 pearls and showed it to them. Everyone was anxious to see to whom Baba would present it. Baba said, "This is no ordinary rosary. It is extremely potent. It can heal every chronic disease. This is very essential for the service which Indra Devi is doing." The precious rosary was presented by Baba to Indra Devi. She was in tears of joy. "Swami, will it heal any and every disease?" she asked. Swami replied, "Except those caused by evil karmas inherited from earlier lives, it heals every disease. Even I will do nothing for those who suffer from inherited karma." Attendance at the bhajans in Indra Devi's yoga center began to grow. Many of them used to press her to initiate them into some sacred mantra. Unable to cope with such insistence, she took her problem to Swami. He advised her, "The most potent of mantra is Om. But as you know, it cannot be given to any and every person. When someone asks for initiation into mantra, look at me in your ring and ask me. Whatever mantra comes to your mind at that moment, give that to the seeker. It shall become the mantra coming from me." With these words, he granted her the spiritual efficacy and authority to initiate devotees into the holy mantra. Indra Devi was blessed thrice over. First, she was blessed to be able to have Swami's darshan any time of her choice. Secondly, she was blessed with the power to heal the sick. And thirdly, she was blessed with the spiritual authority to initiate aspirants into mantra. She could control the physical being as well as spiritual progress of devotees, and she also had the privilege of accessing Bhagwan at will on her spiritual internet, if we may describe it. It is worthy of to note that Swami has not granted even one of these three blessings to any other person. Dr. Frank Baranowski. Dr. Frank Baranowski was a professor of physics in the University of Arizona, US. He acquired special skill in the Kirlian photography, a biomagnetic field photography, for photographing the multicolored aura of illumination that envelops every living being, including human, with a special camera known as Kirlian camera. The color contrast, intensity, breadth, and depth, as well as brightness, vary from person to person and also with the bodily health and intellectual and spiritual level of the subject. While it may be about a foot deep for ordinary persons, it could extend to even 2 feet all over in the case of great thinkers, yogis, and spiritually evolved persons. This aura comprises luminosity of illuminated colors or shades. When the person is quite healthy and cheerful, it will be white. When he is in a mood of affection, pity, or compassion, it will be blue. When the mood is in intense love, the color turns rosy. In anger and hatred, it becomes red. Moreover, the illumination is not ordinarily visible to the naked eye. Once in a million might have the gift of seeing it, but with the Kirlian camera, the aura can be clearly photographed. In fact, even the changing mood of the subject can also be seen in such pictures. Dr. Baranowski used the Kirlian camera for taking photographs of auras of thousands of world leaders, kings, holy persons, and religious leaders, and even queens. He did not come across any person exceeding 2 and 2 half feet in breadth. Dr. Baranowski had read such books about Baba in America. He heard about his divinity, but he did not form any firm faith in him. On the Christmas day of 1977, he happened to visit a certain home. Members of that family, being Sai devotees, were celebrating Christmas, singing Sai bhajans. Not quite relishing it, he removed himself to a room on the upper floor, put out the light, and went to bed. On a table in the room was a standing photograph of Sri Satya Sai Baba with an unlighted candle in front of it. Even as he was looking at it, there was a little crackling sound, and the candle suddenly burst into flame. Nobody had come in, nobody lighted it. How did it get lighted? He was somewhat puzzled and once again looked at the photograph and saw Swami smiling at him. The very next year, that is in 1978, Dr. Baranowski came to India to participate in a conference held in Bangalore. He made use of that opportunity to travel all over the land and to photograph with his Kirlian camera hundreds of yogi and holy persons. In no case did the aura exceed 2 feet in breadth. One morning, when he saw Swami for the first time in Whitefield at 5 a.m., he set eyes on Baba and was stunned. The affluence around Baba was beyond his wildest imagination. It extended beyond 40 feet. As devotees went on singing bhajans, it spread further and further, enveloping the whole building, and thousands of devotees gathered there. It was so bright that Baranowski looked all around him to check up whether it was caused by the numerous mercury vapor lamp around. As Swami moved, the shimmering envelope or luminescence also moved, like a living, vibrant sheet. He concluded it must be integral to Swami and must be emanating from him only. Summer classes were being conducted at that time, so Baranowski could watch Swami continuously for 3 to 4 days. One day, Swami called up to him to address the gathering. Baranowski described his unparalleled experience. I am a scientist. I am a basic Christian, but my faith in that religion is not particularly intense. By means of this Kirlian camera, I investigated 15,000 eminent persons in every walk of life all over the world. But here I have discovered something I never met with anywhere else. The illumination radiated by Baba is of a spectacular rosy color, which is characteristic of the most intense, the deepest, and most selfless love. What also unique is that his aura spreads and submerges, not only merely to his audience hall, but far beyond, as I can see, like a flood of light. It is engulfing everything. The rosy luminance is also displaying silver and gold streaks, intensely bright and perfectly clear. He is a fantastic spectacle which I have never encountered till now. Swami is the full embodiment of love. When Swami comes near us and touches us, that effluence is flowing into us also. We are also getting immersed in that streamy light of ethereal glow. Swami is the walking personification of love. As I am speaking here, you will notice that my body is shivering. Don't you see? But this shiver is not because of fear. The suprahuman aura that surrounds him in indescribable glory is so moving that my body is shivering uncontrollably. Swami materialized a diamond ring and gave it to Dr. Bronowski. He also gave him that much sought after interview. Swami spoke about his months old grandson and told him, "The day you return to America and reach home, your grandson will be subject to a surgery. Don't worry, operation will be successful. The baby will be restored to complete health." Swami told all this on his own. Dr. Bronowski made no mention of the baby at all. However, he did not pay much heed to Baba's word about the child. He was aware the doctors had said that the operation could be performed years later after the baby grew up. He was surprised to learn on reaching home that the baby had indeed been operated that very day. Doctor who performed the operation was an Indian. Dr. Bronowski told him all he experienced in Parthi and showed him the diamond ring presented by Swami. Swami had assured him the baby soon got well. Dr. Baranowski was surprised at Swami's Sarvagnata, total awareness of past, present, and future. In fact, Dr. Baranowski was a disciple of Ulf Messing, a Russian philosopher. Ulf got interested in spiritual aspects of life even at a very age of 15. He began the search for spiritual knowledge. In the process, he came to India in 1936 and traveling on a train to Anandpur. At the Kamalapur railway station, he was amazed to see young Satya Sai Baba, who was barely 10 years old. But Ulf noted the unfathomable aura around the boy and exclaimed, "What a divine personality he is!" Ulf followed young Satyam to his home but could not meet him. On his return, Ulf set up a training center to train young people in the use of Kirlian camera and before his death asked one of his students, Dr. Bronowski, to go to India and study Sai Baba. Dr. Bronowski was amply blessed. He was given the unusual opportunity to investigate Swami's divine power with his equipment. And fully convinced by what he found, he proclaimed the same to the whole world with the deepest conviction. Dr. R. Tong Jumsai. It was around 1945. The Second World War had not ended yet. Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba materialized himself in front of a house in Bangkok. He called the lady of her house and gave her some vibhuti and told her to sprinkle it all over the roof of her house and disappeared. He spoke in her own language. She saw that the powder given to her looked like white sand. She did not, however, disregard his word and sprinkled it all over the roof of her house. Within a few minutes, an air raid took place. All houses except hers were destroyed with bombs bombarding all over. Jumsai Nayudha was a young boy in the family. In due course, R. Tong became a student of science. He obtained doctoral degree from the Imperial College of Science and Technology, worked as an advisor to some ministers in his country. He rose high in the professional echelon. In 1971, NASA of the US advertisement for the post of a scientist in connection with its project of sending an unmanned space vehicle to Mars. R. Tong applied and got the job. The project was to land a vehicle safely on the surface of the planet, overcoming all odds, and to collect material from the planet's surface for investigating in NASA. R. Tong was given the task of planning and designing the equipment needed. Arrangements were made to build a model of Mars in the laboratory with similar characteristics, a model of the rocket and the service lander, and to carry out investigation. Funds required for the entire project were to be provided by NASA. In a few months, R. Tong was able to develop the needed equipment that was tested in the laboratory. But as had earlier been feared, the landing unit burned off as soon as it entered the Martian atmosphere. After some other months, R. Tong built another, but too much in the same fate. It went on for several times. The whole project seemed doomed. Enormous overlays of money went to waste. Poor R. Tong did not know what to do. He felt terribly depressed. Finally, he could make a successful one. It is successfully completed laboratory tests without any hitch. A life-size rocket, which was named Viking, was readied and in due course launched. It was successful, and samples of materials from the Martial surface could be obtained. Artong realized that more than his own effort, it was an invisible hand that helped him in his success. Following this, he abandoned the pursuit of science and busied himself with the search of God. Together with his mother, he came to India and arrived in Whitefield. Bhagwan said Artong to work in the Satya Sai organization and spread spiritual education linked to human values. Soon enough, some dramatic events happened. Artong was totally engrossed in Swami's activity. He had no time to look after his own factory in Bangkok. One day, the security guard was sleeping in his room at its entrance. He had bolted the door from inside, but despite that, Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba entered the room, woke him, and bade him to attend to his duty properly. He spoke in the That language. The guard, who understood his instructions well enough, could not imagine how this stranger could enter the room even though it was bolted from inside. Next day too, the same thing happened. When the head of the factory, Artong, arrived, security guard told him everything that happened, apologized for his lapse, and added that the whole incident was quite baffling and inexplicable. He then noticed the decorated photograph of Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba in Artong's room. He told his master that was the same person who entered the guard room and alerted him. A few days later, Artong arrived at Prashanti Nilayam. Bhagwan was giving a discourse in the need of linking educational systems with human values. In the middle of his discourse, he invited Artong on the dais to speak. In his talk, Artong described his great experience and how Swami had been kind to him with his loving care and affection. From that day onwards, Dr. Artong Jumsai, the distinguished scientist, has been fulfilling himself through serving the divine mission of Bhagwan, disseminating the nectar sweet spiritual precepts of Swami in the West with renewed dedication and stronger faith. In 1998, Dr. Artong started the institution of Satya Sai Education in Bangkok to propagate the idea of free Satya Sai education in human values. The institute has organized an international conference in 2000 on strengthening value education in Prashanti Nilayam, in which 650 educators from as many 78 countries in the world participated. Swami blessed several participants not only with valuable diamond rings but also with several inspiring addresses. Be happy, that is the only thing I ask of you. John Sinclair was a millionaire belonging to the state of Connecticut in the US. At one stage of his life, he was caught in a maze of business problems that destroyed his mental peace. One night, he prayed to God, I do not know where you are, what you look like. I only do one thing, that is, that you do exist. Please help me. He prayed most earnestly and in total surrender. From then on, he began to note God's invisible hand protecting him. One day he noticed someone walking through the inner hall in his home between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. He stared steadily. The person stood unmoving. John Sinclair did not know who he was and what he was there for, but he could recognize that he experienced some vague sense of happiness and joy that was indescribable. In a similar manner, he had the same vision on another night. He was sure that it was no dream, it was starkly real. Sinclair went to the spiritual center, Adhyatmik Kendra, in New York and mentioned his recent experience to someone there. The person said, just a minute please, went inside and returned with a small packet of vibhuti in his hand and gave it to Sinclair. Uttered Om Sai Ram. He also spoke at length about Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba and assured him that it was Swami who had given darshan to him. Sinclair was deeply touched. He was but a mere businessman in far-off America. His knowledge of anything spiritual was next to nothing. He had not even read a single book on Sri Satya Sai Baba. Yet the Lord had visited his home in person and granted darshan to an insignificant person like him. In his mind, he fell at the lotus feet of Swami. His heart began yearning for Bhagwan's grace and for Bhagwan's love. Very soon, it grew unbearably intense. As a consequence of that unbearable unbearable yearning to Baba and Baba's compassion, Sinclair set off for Prashanti Nilayam. On arrival, Swami invited him into the room and said, "I came twice to you." Sinclair stared at Swami in bewilderment. Swami continued, "I have done a lot for you. I have given plenty to you. Even then you have no peace. Why don't you do something for Swami?" When he heard Swami's words, Sinclair was prepared to give whatever Swami asked for. "Sure, Swami, most certainly," he said. Swami said, "Be happy always. That is the only thing I ask of you." Sinclair was stunned to hear what Swami desired of him. Nothing but his own well-being. Speaking in the magnificent Purna Chandra auditorium of the auspicious Guru Purnima day in 1993, Sinclair said, "When I was a young boy being brought up as a Christian, I used to feel miserable that I was born 2000 years after the departure of Jesus Christ. Someone has truly heard my cry of agony. Here is sitting that very God who had sent Jesus to us." Sinclair also recounted a couple of miraculous incidents. A few months before my arrival in Prashanti, I had to make a business trip to another place. I told my wife that I would pilot my helicopter myself. She tried to dissuade me. "Your mind is very much distracted nowadays because of your business problems. Why don't you engage a professional pilot? Satya Sai Baba is too busy to sit with you all the time to protect you, as he were to protect you only all the time. He has got far too many problems to look after. Why do you waste his precious time?" I told her, "I am a qualified pilot. Why do you doubt my flying abilities?" I piloted my own helicopter, but as feared by my wife, the engine of the helicopter failed on the way. The hydraulic system gave way. I lost control of the craft and I knew that death was certain. I pulled out Swami's photo from pocket and looked at it. Next moment I found Swami right in the helicopter. He piloted it skillfully and landed it safely on the flank of a hill. He opened the side door, pulled me out carefully, pushed the helicopter away and disappeared. This is how Bhagwan has been saving me time after time, drawing closer and closer to his lotus feet. I will now describe to it a more astonishing incident. That woman who is sitting in front row here in this gathering is Marilyn Sinclair. She is an expert horse rider. She acquired a fine horse and rode it and also trained for a competition. Once she was riding fast in the riding course, tried to clear a high wall. Unfortunately, leg of the horse hit against the wall. The girl was thrown off her saddle and her head dashed against the ground, and the 1800-pound heavy horse landed on her. It took full 45 minutes before the girl was admitted in the emergency ward of a hospital. I got the message on phone and rushed there. I took out the small packet of vibhuti from my pocket as I applied it on the wounds. This is just like the holy water of Christianity. I also put a little quantity in her mouth. When I went to put her on the next day, there was not a single wound on her face. 3 months later, she has fully recovered and resumed riding. But the story does not end here. In the interview room, Swami looked at Marlene and said, "Did I not rescue you from paralysis?" She said, "Yes, Swami, yes you did." After the interview, I asked Marlene, "What is that Swami asked you and what did you answer him?" She then told me, "On that day of my incident, I lost an eye. When the horse landed heavily on me, I was paralyzed on one side. As I lay in the rain helpless, a person stood by my side, watching me when I was being taken by ambulance to the hospital. He was by my side in the vehicle, in the emergency ward too. He was by my side all the time. He also kept vigil constantly on me throughout the night at hospital. That person is none else than this Sai Baba. He made my eye all right and he healed my paralysis too. Only then he did not move out of the hospital. Even though this incident happened several years ago, I did not know about it. All the conversation began between Baba and her in the interview room. This is an excellent instance to show that Swami is much more intimate than even one's mother and father. My Swami, I have full faith on you. I totally surrender myself at you," concluded Sinclair. Jagadishan. He was working as a Deputy Director General in the Industrial Developmental Authority Government of Malaysia. Whenever he spoke about Swami, he used to be contemptuous, malicious and wild-tongued in criticizing him. His name is Jagadishan. Once it so happened that Jagadishan went to the house of his mother-in-law. He saw Swami's photograph in her room. He was virulent in his condemnation of Swami. For 2 long years, he riled and ranted and finally sent to the picture, "If you really possess all those divine powers as claimed by them, show me the proof. Only then will I realize these fairy tales." He did not realize that he had literally thrown a challenge to Bhagwan. No sooner had he said these words than Vibhuti appeared on that picture that had provoked his ire. He felt as if lightning had struck him. He realized that in this world of scientific thought, there was something transcending science, something incomprehensible to science. 4 months later, Jagadishan visited India and travelled to Prashanti Nilayam. In the audience hall, Swami neared him and gently moved his loving lips. "Malaysia?" Surprised and wondering how Swami knew that he came from Malaysia, he answered, "Yes, sir." Swami invited him into the room. Jagadishan was now 32, but somehow felt as he was a boy of 7 sitting with his father. The fatherly affection and love of Swami melted his heart. Copious tears flowed down his cheeks. He had believed in Swami only for a mere 4 months now. Earlier to that, he had nothing but utter contempt for him. His vileness during the dark period was hanging heavy in his heart, and he could never hide his misery. He decided to make a clean breast of it. "Swami, please forgive me. Till 4 months ago, I had never believed in you." Bhagwan shook his index finger from left to right and again from right to left, and smilingly said, "Ha ha, you are not a mere non-believable. You strongly opposed. You were a strong opposition." Jagadishan collapsed in grief and shame. He fell at Baba's lotus feet and began literally weeping. Swami held his shoulder and slowly raised him up. "Don't cry, Bangaru, don't cry. Swami knows everything." Nowadays, at Swami's suggestion, he is functioning as the center coordinator of the Satya Sai organizations in the East and fulfilling his destiny in the service of the Sai mission. Mala Vikshepa Avarna. In one of his discourse, Swami pointed out that man is gifted with intelligence and discernment, yet he is not able to recognize his true self. The reason for this is the cumulative effort of the deeds done in previous life. Because of good deeds, Satakarma, one takes birth as a human being. However, in this human birth, a person indulges in doing evil like adultery, thievery, untruthfulness. The consequences, true, will be evil. These are evil are of 3 natures: Mala, Vikshepa, and Avarna. These obscure the spiritual vision of man and prevent him from recognizing the glorious form of his true self, Swaswarupa Jnana. Swami then proceeded to elaborate what Mala, Vikshepa, and Avarna means. Mala is the cumulative effect of the evil deeds done during previous lives. As an instance in point, here is a story. A diamond merchant was going on a business trip. He traveled on a horseback. As he rose fast, his bag containing the diamonds dropped on the ground unnoticed. 2 friends traveling behind found it. At the sight of the precious diamond, avarice took hold of their mind. Each wanted to grab it for himself. While the younger one kept watch over the bag, the other went searching for food. On the other way, he got another vicious idea to eliminate his friend altogether. Accordingly, he mixed poison in the food meant for his friend. He came back and told the waiting friend, "Dear young brother, have your meal first, and while you eat, I will keep watch on the gems." The younger one had his own plan. As the elder one bent over, the younger brother dealt a savage blow on his neck with a heavy sword. Jubilant that he was now the sole master of the gem, he ate his food with relish. But as it had been contaminated, he too died of poison. Although the 2 friends did not hold of the precious diamond, he could not derive any benefit from it. It is Mala that led them to evil conduct. The root cause of Mala is evil thought and evil deed, which can be destroyed only through incessant remembering and thinking of God. There is no other way. Next is Vikshepa, which means lack of steadiness of mind. Ramakrishna Paramhans was a serving priest in the majestic temple of goddess Kali in Dakshineshwar. That temple had been built by a pious lady called Rani Rasmani. She built the temple one day and asked Ramakrishna to sing a song in praise of Devi. While he sang, devotees including Rasmani was moving their heads in tune with the song. Paramahansa suddenly stopped singing and gave a resounding slap on Rasmani's cheek. He scolded her. Your body is here, but your mind is elsewhere, on property litigation in the High Court of Calcutta. She was noble and devout, so she took her chastisement in proper spirit as a deserved punishment for her unsteadiness of mind, that is, Vikshepa. To distance mind from Vikshepa, there is only one way: relentless practice of concentration and single mindedness. Now comes Avarna. I am a student, I am a teacher, I am a Brahmin, I am a Kshatriya, I am a man, I am a woman, and so on. A person falls into delusion. I am this body. Ignorance of this kind is avarna. If you meditate deeply and with vivek and discernment, you will soon realize that you are neither a student, nor a teacher, nor a Brahmin, nor a Kshatriya, nor a male, nor a female. The reality, the truth is, you are the embodiment of Atma. To recognize this reality is to get over avarna. A pregnant tigress was crossing a river. When she suddenly gave birth to a cub, the mother was swept away by the rushing waters, but the cub reached dry ground somewhere downstream and joined a herd of sheep. Mixing with the sheep day after day, it totally forgot its true identity of a tiger. It ate grass as the sheep did. It bleated like the sheep. It completely lost consciousness of its inherent strength and capability. Some time later, a tiger attacked the herd and noticed the tiger cub in the midst of the herd and was surprised to see it behaving like a sheep. The tiger caught hold of the cub and dragged it to the water pool, pointed out to the cub's image in the water. Look, you're not a sheep, you're a tiger. Recognize your true identity. Only then the cub learnt the truth. The only way to remove avarna is total surrender to God, Daivarpana. In his discourse, Swami addressed us as Divya Atma Swarupalara, embodiment of the divine Atma. He is thus time and again reminding us of our true identity, constantly exhorting to each one of us. You are not merely a body of flesh and blood, you are the embodiment of Atma. We realize that Mala, Vikshepa, and Avarna cannot be rid by constantly having Swami's names dance on our tongues. That is, by chanting his name all the time, firmly seating Swami on the altar of our heart, and leading spiritual, pure lives with the spiritual enlightenment Swami is blessing us with. Humble homage to the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba. Om Shri Satya Sai Parabrahmane Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter 14 from Tapovanam Sri Satya Sai Satcharitra by Sant Shri Jandhalya Venkateshwara Shastri, 1928 to 2003.